Dave gets possibly gets the award for traveling the furthest to be here today, and we are very, very grateful that he is here. He is the Chief Engagement Officer of MetroQuest, which is an internationally recognized, he is an internationally recognized speaker, author, and public engagement strategist on best practices, specifically with the use of software. So we are very, very thrilled for him to be here today. He's got 20 years of experience on a wide range of award-winning projects. He's going to walk us through some of those here today. He is he has come to us here from Vancouver. He is a graduate of the University of British Columbia. And as part of his bio, he says he is a die-hard fan of community engagement. So he is the right person to lead us on here. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Well, good morning. It's a real pleasure to be here, and what I'm going to talk to you about today is some of the best practices that we've learned in online engagement over the past 19 years that we've been at it. And it seems incredible that it's been 19 years. We were talking about the need for using technology to enhance public participation back when Windows 95 was fresh out of the gate. People thought we were absolutely crazy, but we evolved out of a university research project. So we recognized that we may be a bit of ahead of our time, but we didn't realize we were 14 years ahead of our time. Now, public involvement using online technologies is fairly ubiquitous, and that affords us a real opportunity to look at what's working and what's not, and to draw some conclusions about best practices. So that's what I'm going to share with you today. For many, many years, and still this is a very familiar sight. We've got a special name for these people. We call them the STP. They are the same 10 people that show up to everything. You might as well put out place cards for them, because they're going to show up no matter what you do. I've got a shoebox filled with these because for years we ran public meetings. The alternative is sometimes this, where we've got a huge turnout and we kind of wish we didn't. So we were asked by several agencies, since we've been involved with a lot of online public engagement projects, to look at some patterns and to see if we can draw some best practices out of it. And so we've created a bit of a recipe for what seems to be working after looking at 150 different case studies and talking to agencies about them. The first question we asked as researchers is, what does successful mean? It might mean different things to different agencies. And so we asked these 150 agencies what their goals were for public engagement. And they told us really two main things. Quantity. They wanted to engage more people, but not just volumes of people, a broader demographic. They were complaining that the demographic that tends to attend public meetings and public engagement activities is from a very narrow demographic, and we're missing huge portions of the population. Secondly, about quality. It's not just about engaging people, but it's gathering informed input. Input that we can trust is nuanced in terms of what the choices actually are and what the trade-offs are between those choices, and input that's actionable, not just comments that are very difficult to kind of reach conclusions about what 4 out of 5 people thought about an issue, but something that can be actionable in terms of our reporting. Then we looked at the spectrum of who ends up showing up. No matter what you do, there are going to be people who are positive and people who are negative, but the vast majority of people are in that moderate kind of middle. And then we look at who shows up. It turns out that it varies greatly by level of motivation. People who are highly motivated tend to be, Maslow was absolutely right, tend to be motivated by anger or fear. So if you're ever thinking, hey, why is everybody against this project? It's probably that your public participation process has simply filtered out all of the people who aren't that motivated. The people who are next motivated are the people who are extremely positive, but they're only so motivated. The people who are actually the least motivated are the people who are indifferent about the project, or maybe even positive about your agency, and they don't feel like they have to come across town to give you a pat in the back or maybe give you a few ideas. They're not that motivated. Those are the people who haven't already made up their mind about the project, who have something to contribute, and they're really the most difficult to engage. So the question then becomes, how high are the hurdles for your public participation process? The lower that you can make them, the more opportunity you have to draw in people that haven't already decided what they think. It's kind of like coaxing a squirrel to eat out of your hand. Any arm waving is going to scare them away. So we need to think very much about how many barriers we're putting up. 6 key lessons emerged from this research, and I'm just going to go through them one at a time. And please don't feel the need to write down these things. I'm going to go through them fairly quickly. We are going to send around a clipboard where if you put your name in there and your email address, we'll be happy to send you this guide that we've created out of this research. So let me go through them fairly quickly. The first one is aim for a 5-minute experience. 5 minutes is going to give you the best opportunity to engage the largest demographic. Once you ask people for 10 minutes on a survey, it starts to drop off very rapidly from there. It actually doesn't benefit you that much to ask for 2 minutes. 5 minutes is about the right number. If you can avoid it, select software that does not require people to register before they begin. It's a killer of participation. In fact, when we compared, about 1 out of 10 people would be willing to do that. What you're doing is you're basically saying, how motivated are you? Are you really motivated? The people who are less motivated will not do this. So there's ways of collecting their information, but don't do it before they begin. Number 3 is offer as many different ways to participate as possible. Now, web-based engagement, smartphone engagement, about half of our users, our participants, public participants, use smartphones to access MetroQuest. So it's absolutely critical not only that the technology that you're using to engage people is usable on a smartphone, it needs to be delightful on a smartphone, because remember, these people are looking for any excuse to go away. Kiosks, and you'll see that over there there's a kiosk that we used on the Bergstrom Expressway project. We love these kiosks because you can put them in a location, a library or a community center, and people can just come across them. And if you get them in the right location where people have a little bit of time on their hands, you can get 200 to 500 people per day participating in your project. Probably people that wouldn't otherwise normally have found it. Tablets are another great way to go to the people. So go to a public meeting where people already are, set up a little table and engage people in very quick exercises. So there's a variety of different ways to use technology to engage people. That doesn't necessarily mean they have to find your website and go and do something. Number 4, make it as insightful and delightful as possible. Now, these 2 words are important. Insightful means try to educate people before you ask them the questions. Really help them understand the trade-offs associated with different choices, and so you can trust that the information coming back is informed. Delightful means that they're going to have such a good time actually filling out the survey that they're going to recommend it to their friends on Facebook and Twitter and so forth, and they can help you spread the word. The difference between a text-based survey and something that's a little bit more delightful to use is about 7.5 times more involvement. So that just sort of speaks to how these people are looking for entertainment, and they're looking for something that's colorful and easy. I don't know if I've ever seen anybody suggesting that I go to a multiple choice survey on my Facebook wall, but I don't share those things, and I'm sure you don't as well. So I'm going to show you a few examples now very quickly. I can't show you too much, but just to give you a flavor of how we have chosen to make the experience online as insightful and delightful as possible. So I've got a number of tabs open here. The first one I'm going to show is the MOPAC South, a context-sensitive solution survey. The welcome screen is just meant to get people started right away, give people a little bit of context about what the project is about, and really just get them to begin. The first kind of question that we ask people, and this is probably, stemming from what Greg told us, really important to start with the right question. And I think this is the right question to start with. What's important to you? That's a great way to begin a conversation with the community. It tells them that it's about them and their priorities. And so here, we're just simply picking what our top priorities are and putting them in rank order. Very, very quick, but it also sends the message, this is about what's important to you and your families. Next, I've actually just said what's important to me, and so I'm given options for weighing in a little bit more. So there's a little visual preference survey. What kind of, for example, roadway signage do you prefer? Landscaping, a whole variety of other things that are related to this project. So pretty fun and fast to do. And then everybody's favorite, talk about what issues you have about this area, so you can go in here and identify any safety concerns or any type of issues that you would like, and you're going to see this map just get dotted up with all kinds of comments, and then you can see where they cluster in different areas under different categories. Now, I did say that you can ask them for their personal information, but this is the time to ask them for their personal information. They've just actually learned about the project, learned what's at stake, and given you some ideas, and they're curious to see what the results are and how they affected the outcomes. So they will give you their information at this point. It's a scant 5 minutes before you might have asked for their information and driven them off. So just a few more examples here. The Lone Star Regional Rail Project. I'm sure you folks have heard of these projects. We offered this in English and in Spanish so people could toggle back and forth. The Oak Hill Parkway, so again, a very different sort of corridor project at a smaller scale. They had a wonderful visual preference survey in that one. The VIA Vision 2040 Long Range Planning Project, I think was an excellent example, not only of a great online experience, but a really nice companion experience that complemented it. The Bergstrom Expressway, I showed you that kiosk that we used for the Bergstrom Expressway. I like this one because it gave things like visual preferences where you can compare things side by side, which is really a fast way to get people's input on different options. This one you might have seen, it's the Texas Transportation Plan for 2040. I like this one because, again, it starts with the most important question in my mind, but then goes on to some scenarios and really digs into some of the financial issues that we're facing. Looking at these different scenarios, you can see each one of them gets scored based on your top priorities. So you see this one does moderately on my top priorities. This one does pretty well on my top priorities, so I'm going to give it 5 stars. I might make a comment about it. I can see how much it costs. I can read a description about it. But then you can go into a little bit more detail, and you can actually take the available budget and start spending it around different areas. And as you do that, you can see how the performance of the transportation system changes based on your investments. So you can see traffic congestion is really poor in this investment scenario. So I'm going to do some things to expand the roadway construction and so forth, and you can play this game and end up with a budget that tries to meet your needs. It develops a lot of catharsis for your agency because people realize there's restricted funds and there's multiple competing objectives that they themselves hold dear. The last one I'll show is this new tool that we've developed specifically for the TIP process. So this one allows you to go in and look at different proposed actions, proposed developments, and vote on whether or not you think they ought to be funded. So here I can go in and select my different priorities. You can see it's adding up how much I've spent here, keeping me within budget, and you can subset them by different areas and zoom to different parts of the region. So needless to say, there's a variety of different ways that we've chosen to use different screen types to make the experience as delightful as possible. In the follow-up, I'm happy to send you examples of that so you can play around with them yourself. Number 5 is promoting like a pro. Now, taking a page out of Don Draper's playbook, essentially you have 5 seconds to get somebody's attention online. That's about what you've got. If you get somebody's attention on issues that they care about in an interesting way, then they might give you 5 minutes of their time. Make the best use of that 5 minutes you can by showing them something that meets their needs, that resonates with their values, that's fun and interactive, and they will tell 50 friends. And that's how you go from 50 people to 5,000 people. So one of the best campaigns that we've worked on recently is this campaign in Nashville, where they created, they're picking their future essentially for Nashville, and they created this wonderful little campaign with these just cards, and they just sent them around on Twitter and Facebook and then just let them go. And these were really, really popular, enough to get people to click and say, what's that all about? And then they move on from there. So they had all these different ways to pick. And this next one that I'm going to show you is the one that we actually were looking at the data back in our shop, and all of a sudden we saw participation just jump through the roof. And this was why. This little girl here. So, all right, Nashville, it's time to pick. Number 6 is monitor and adjust as needed. One of the most difficult things that we see is people who have, bless their heart, created a really well thought through public participation plan and not left any room for creativity halfway through when they discover there's gaps. There's demographic gaps in participation. We don't have everybody from a certain demographic or a certain region participating, and they don't have any resources left to actually spend some time to try to encourage them to participate. So I would encourage some of your funds to be set aside for filling in those gaps in creative ways. And I'll show you an example right now. So there are some of the success factors. The guidebook has plenty more in them, so just wanted to go through those quickly as the top of mind ones. In thinking about a case study to show you today to make these things a little bit more real, I decided to focus on the MPO in Atlanta. They just did a fantastic job. They created a really captivating and quick online experience, but it's what they did to complement that I think is so wonderful. It is not the case where you can just build some technology and everything just sort of magically happens. You need to complement it with some strategies and techniques. For example, the media is looking for stories like what you're doing to improve your communities. And so engaging them and asking them, would they help talk about what's going on and promote participation? Every time they got a spot on the 6 o'clock or the 11 o'clock news, participation just went up dramatically. Share kits. Share kits, now this is a very, very simple thing. It's a 3-page document that you can make available to bloggers, to community groups, stakeholders in your area that are interested, and it contains sample tweets, sample Facebook posts, sample blog stories that they can cut and paste, with graphics that they can use to make them colorful. And these folks are looking for content for their newsletters. They're looking for things to share to increase their readership, to engage their readers. This is one of the simplest ways that you can get of taking your project and your voice and having other people help promote it with people that trust them already. They may not trust your agency as much as they trust the people that they follow, the newsletters that they read. And these people, those bloggers, those people writing newsletters are wringing their hands trying to think of what's going to go in the next newsletter. You've got content for them. You only have to write it once, and then you just share it with multiple agencies. They'll change a few words, and they'll get it out there, and you'll see your participation go through the roof. The other thing that Atlanta did really well is they had a knapsack filled with iPads and a sign. And they grabbed it every time they were going out to a public meeting and set up a little table. and just allowed people who were attending a meeting for a different reason. They glommed onto agencies or community groups that were already hosting events saying, hey, can we set up a little table? They said yes. They engaged people, and they used that to kind of target where there was a missing demographic in their participation. So here's some images from that. It's called pop-up engagement. Let me show you a few examples of how you could use pop-up engagement to fill in some of the gaps that you might have in participation after engaging people online. Boards that ask people to just submit their ideas. Every hour you take a picture of the board, you wipe it down, and new people come up and express their ideas. Having the dot games just in the community center where people can grab 5 dots and put them next to their preferred projects or their preferred ideas. As a result of doing that and getting that broad participation, you can then break down your reports by demographic group and say, we heard from the business community, we heard from people over 55, this is what they thought about projects, this is how they differed from people under 35, and you can use that to really demonstrate that you've heard from a broad cross-section of the community in a way that you might not have been able to before when you had the same 10 people showing up for your meetings. The last thing that I'll mention is the need to understand that the public engagement process doesn't end after you stop requiring information from the public. It ends when you tell the public what you've heard from them. This graphic is great. Atlanta created these graphics, infographics, that they sent back to the public. Instead of sending them back a 100-page report, they sent them back images of, here's what we heard from you, in a very colorful and easy to access way. And I think that does something in your community that is going to last for years. It builds a culture of community engagement. You're reinforcing the value of participation. And people who see these, who didn't participate, will want to participate next time. In the end, they engaged 18,000 people in this process, so far more than they have traditionally, and even far more than they have with the online surveys that they've done. And I think, to some extent, it was a result of the software that they were using. We can take some credit for that, but they made choices about how they configured it. But I think a large part of it was the companion projects that they did to make sure that they got a broad representation from the community. So, once again, happy to send you that guide that we've created with some of these best practices listed, and I want to thank you very much.